Hello, and welcome to my video. On the Talksheet today is the subject of masculinity, which in these days in America, and I suppose worldwide as well, it seems to be in crisis. Especially in crisis is the masculinity of young, cis, straight men. And as someone who falls squarely into that demographic, but also feels that I'm pretty well adjusted and secure about how masculinity plays a role in my identity, I thought maybe I could try to give some worthwhile insight. Now, I don't have answers on how to fix young men. I don't have answers why the young men are so troubled. If you want an answer type video, you can surely find that elsewhere. I'm just going to kind of talk about me and my own experiences and opinions based on what I've seen and felt in my life. And hopefully, that will be interesting or illuminating for you, the viewer. So we're going to dive right in. As usual, I have my room temp polar seltzer. Today also I have a little bit of afternoon coffee to help me stay on task. And per the topic today, I have my color therapy glasses that should be reducing my aggression. I thought that would be appropriate for the day. So, with no time to waste, the masculinity crisis. It seems that no one, not the young men themselves or anyone around them, are happy about the state of things. The state of things being young men having a healthy and contented sense of self. When I see, clickable headlines and thumbnails and titles declaring, in one way or another, the masculinity crisis, I can only assume that also, including what I just said, young men feeling healthy about themselves, but it also then implies that no one likes the masculine role models that young men are gravitating to, and B, that there is a significant lack then of positive role models for masculinity. I put positive in air quotes because, what's positive is obviously a matter of opinion. What should be a good role model. But certainly, I think the prevailing criticism of the masculine young man is that it's so negative. There's just a lot of negativity around it. You can see lots of primary or secondary sources of this online in the comments or the originally generated content. But you also see it in real life, instances of weird, antisocial, maladaptive, kind of frightening behavior. Just a very, very negative and very proud. And maybe even, totally intentional disposition to be this way. And, while, commentary on the straight cis guy, this, it's been criticized for, a long time. This isn't new, men are dogs type thing. Been criticized for the lack of tact, awareness, emotional intelligence. It seems though that we've kind of moved to a level further than men are dogs, where it's like men are like frightening monsters. It seems like there's an especially bad situation here. Though I would like to insert here that what the young men of today, what their social aptitude, what their general social aptitude has suffered from, the things that have limited their aptitude are also the things that have limited the social aptitude of everyone else as well. And I'm talking about COVID and the hyper accelerated presence of social media. We've all become a bit more antisocial because of these things. Not just young men. You scrutinize any demographic of people, and I'm sure you're going to find its own, your own effects from COVID and social media. I said I wouldn't be able to give answers, but I guess that's the closest I'll get, is I think COVID and social media have most to do with this. It's just that it would seem that young men's, in this case, are the problem here is louder and more disturbing and more widespread. And so, as I've said a few times already, there's more to this than I can address in entirety. So I'm going to break it down into like 3 categories that I'll talk a little bit about. One will be young men's relations with each other, as in friendship, the state of that. Young men's relationships to, oh, that's cute, to role models, who they're choosing, what's available. And then 3, young men's relationships with women. So the first one I listed is friendship. Now, friendship is an incredibly important part of feeling like a worthy and content member of society, and maybe even just a human being. Myself, I consider myself very fortunate to be a dude I've had friends in every stage of my life. And friendship is very important to me. Though saying something like that, like friendship is important to me, I'd say is only something that would have come to mind within the last 5-7 years. I think, coming out of school, where you actually realize, you start to intellectualize something like friendship as important. Because, once you're out of school, it becomes more of a thing you have to consciously and intentionally nurture, like a plant, or doing exercise. You have to think, oh, exercise is important to me. Friendship is important to me, so I gotta make, It's like that. But, as a kid, friendship was this less belabored thing. Not that it's always so belabored as an adult, but, you were just in a circumstance where you had your veritable pick of the litter most of the time. And as far as making friends, one thing that I had to my benefit was that some would say I'm funny. I'm a funny guy. At least someone who has put a lot of effort towards being funny. Like in high school, I was voted the class clown senior year. So that's documented proof that I'm funny. High schoolers thought I was funny when I was in high school, so nothing more to say about that. But to that end, I think humor is a really important way to make friends and connect. And while, there's certainly a lot of humor that is reference-based, as in references a shared interest or a shared experience, or like books, movies, or whatever, or requires some kind of like in-knowledge. I think humor is such a great way to make friends, because really at the center of it, you don't, circumstances aside, you don't need a shared... Do I even agree with this? I think humor is really important because it doesn't really require anything but yourself. And certainly, different cultures, different circumstances, what's funny for me here might not always be funny um, in China, in everywhere in China. But, all you need is yourself and a shared moment, right? And it's this ephemeral thing, and it comes from within our bodies. And you don't need, don't need to have seen the same movie or read the same book or gone to the same soccer team all the time. But, it's as funny as slipping on a banana peel or having a baby sneeze in someone's face. That requires nothing. And to be funny, I think, I think it's very possible to be very funny without being like a student of comedy. In fact, my opinion is very rarely are comedy students very funny. Honesty is always funny. I won't unpack that, but posturing rarely allows you to be funny. So both those things are true, and so you can figure out why. Though unfortunately, not everyone can be funny. Though, you don't have to be. You don't have to be. Now, as far as an expression of masculinity, being funny can put you in a few different places. I'd say growing up and as now, I don't think I really strike anyone as a quote-unquote manly person or like, I don't know. I'm sensitive, I'm effeminate, which is two reasons why I'm also funny. I'm not coordinated, sports oriented, I'm kind of boyish, yada yada. I'm not like The Rock. I'm more like someone else. And I was lucky enough that very rarely growing up did I ever wish to be someone else. I was, of course there were times where I was uncomfortable and, wishing for this or that. But I never had the experience of being like, oh, I wish per se, my body was a certain way or that I talked different or was born somewhere else different or anything like that. But anyway, being funny and engaging was sort of my demonstration of value, of social value, I guess, per se. And how I felt, I'll use this word, how I felt powerful, I guess, in some moments. And, feeling powerful is an important thing for young men. And I think that goes to show there are ways you can do that are safe and even, helpful or enjoyed by many. Without being tyrannical and creepy. And so I'd like to now, just quickly, a quick related tangent. I'd like to speak on something that I think is overrated. What I see come up in discussions of friendlessness or trying to make friends or, state of young people culture these days and post 2020. It's this topic of hobbies. People bemoan that other people don't have hobbies. Like they're like, oh, they have TikTok instead of hobbies. And that if people had hobbies again, that there'd all be all these social ills that would be remedied. Like, people would have something to talk about or a reason to like go out and join a club and stuff. Listen, hobbies are good to have because they're like fun for you ideally, and they might give you something that you can talk about in an engaging way. But I'll say hobbies do not an interesting person make. It will preoccupy you, and maybe that's all you want. You just want to not, you just want to get in on something. But as far as like something that's like, fellas, like, if you, like, girls are looking for guys with hobbies because then you have something to talk about. It's like, I don't want to judge, like, if that's helpful to you to have that as a topic. I mean, far be it from me to tell you otherwise, but it's a lot like traveling, right? Being someone who travels a lot does not make you very interesting unless you have something interesting to say about it, or you have developed an interesting opinion or worldview as a result of having traveled. The act of traveling is not interesting. The hobby is not interesting. It's you who has to make it interesting. So to put a cap on this quick footnote, I guess, is, hobbies, great. But you do not need one to be an interesting person or even to have friends. I'm not putting a cap on this. I forgot. I have one more point here. So as an example, and it's me. So like when I was in middle school, early high school, my main hobby was like video games and YouTube videos about video games. And no one that I was like kind of already friends with by that point, the people I'd grown up through elementary, blah, blah, blah. Very few people were into that. Like nerd things these days, the social stigma around it has gone down so much. Even, when I was young, it had gone down from, I'm sure, what it was maybe in the 90s or whatever. But no one I was friends with, so that I never brought it up. That nerd shit you just were not supposed to talk about. So I didn't. And, I was still friends with them. There were other things to talk about. Most, again, we were experiencing we had the shared experience of being in a school together. So we had other things to talk about. So, on one hand, it is kind of sad that I suppressed this aspect of myself out of fear of tyranny. But on the other hand, it just shows you can have deep friendship with a person who's disconnected completely from my hobby, or you could even say my deep particular interest at that time. So there. But yeah, it's hard to make new friends as an adult. Everyone knows it. They make whole TV shows about this now. But if you're looking for tips, well, one is, I think there are certain jobs where it's harder to make friends than others. I think it's generally extremely difficult to make friends in a kind of virtual or white collar position. I already kind of made a video about that, but just being the fact that you're separated from everyone you're having a shared experience with. And that's why, still like service jobs can be good for that. I said, I meet one or two people who become my friends when I've worked in, coffee or whatever, and sometimes it might just be that you're trauma bonding, you're doing something that super sucks and it makes you kind of like each other more for it. And it might be, toxic as these things can be, but at least, you have a significant shared element amongst you. And, that's just one piece of advice. I wish there was a magic bullet, but there's not. I'm very happy that I have kept friends for a long time. I'd say, it's true. It becomes really, really difficult. I used, I think, the metaphor of a garden earlier, and that really it really is what it is. You have to become really mindful of, people as plants. That, or another way to say it, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Being like, you want to give a little attention to people. If you want someone to stay within your orbit, you got to give them a little attention ever so often. And while I think for sure there are connections that you can build with people where there's this kind of safety net where there's this idea, it's like, well, I could not see you for 10 years. And if you came back into my orbit, we would still be friends. Like, there's that connection there. But for the most part, yes, it does become a thing you have to practice. sending like a little message or a letter or a whatever, ever so often with people, you're not seeing every single day. I think the people I've surrounded myself with, mostly share kind of my even temperament and desire for non-conflict, which in itself can be its own clog in the gears, but less so than someone with a hotter head or more angry, someone who's not wearing their whatever these were called, aggressive suppressants. And with these people who are my friends, and I think the reason they are my friends is because I am myself with them. I'm my true self. And sometimes even when I don't want to be. But it is good to be your true, most honest self, because the people that you attract while you're being your truest, most honest self, they will enrich your life and stay with you even as years pass or things change, because you are you. And if you make friends based off of a posture or something that ultimately is not really something that is authentic to you or sustainable, like a costume or whatever, those people will not be your friend, and that might blow up in your face. Sometimes, this hasn't happened to me yet, so, sometimes you make friends with someone who just turns crazy. I don't know what to do about that. That's never happened to me. But, so making friends, it's not an easy or simple path, but ultimately my advice is keep an open countenance, keep your expression inviting and friendly and light. Be yourself, whether it's online or offline. Then when you make friends, when the occasion arises, because it will, if you are wanting it to and you're open to it, the occasion will arise. You will be yourself, and you'll find someone who really vibes with that, and that will be awesome, and you'll know that you've got a real thing there. All right, fellas. Okay. And so now I'm on to male role models. Why does it feel like there are no good ones? That the ones we have, the most prominent ones in our culture, are like poison. I think it's because, we have this whole hydra of male personalities across online. You cut one down, you cut one Andrew Tate down, and a clavicular rises to take its place. But there's a whole web of these freaks, and they're online. They're trying to make money off online, and it's really a simple equation to get engagement from online. The surefire way now, I think I saw something, don't quote me on that, I think I saw something where it was like up to a certain period of time, like it was like sex that sold. If you wanted something, you just had to have something sexy happen. And that's still true. But now, recently, the number one thing, if you want to get attention, is anger. Anger is and I don't think anyone will be surprised to hear that, but anger is the key. So if you want to, get started and have sustainable income by talking in front of a camera, you're gonna model your behavior in front of the camera based on what will get engagement, which is being sensational, being uncomplicated, being shocking, grotesque, loud, angry, all these things. Even if, as I suspect for some of them, even if that's not who they really are, they're gaming the system. They're doing a job. And our young men see this, innocent as they are, and they're entertained by it, and they want to imitate it. And it's really a simple process. these young men are so easily exploited by the posers, so easily exploited, so easily led astray, and that's a shame. But I find that the hope behind this idea is it suggests that these bad actors, and I don't mean bad actors as in not good at acting. I mean like bad moral people acting. It suggests that the bad actors don't actually believe a lot of these toxic things that they're saying, but that they're just doing it for the money, which is also disturbing that they could then care that little about their effect that they have on the people that see them. That's its own problem. But whatever. Well, not whatever. That's how it stands. And then what is also kind of a bright, or a way to look at it, is young men are just persuadable. They're malleable. They're open-eyed. They're looking, and there's a hopeful idea behind the idea. If it wasn't this toxic, this ecosystem, there could be a world where there is a nicer, better ecosystem that could just as easily persuade the attention of young men. Who are my male role models? That is a great question. I find it difficult to answer coherently. Fundamentally, I think we're most influenced as far as let's say for the sake of talking about this, that you can only be your masculinity. Your masculinity can only be influenced by a role model who is a man. Let's just say that for the sake of this, because I think you can model your feeling of masculinity based on a woman, for sure. But let's just pretend it's the other one for a second. I think, of course, I am most influenced by, my father, my uncle, my cousin, my friends who I talk to, peers that I see and speak to regularly. And I'm, again, blessed to have a lot of good influences in that way. But then, also, that's kind of, those are the really important fundamental role models. But we also have aspiring figures, people that you don't even know, right? People like writers or artists, these kinds of role models who you can see posts from now and model your behavior off of. And as far as people like that, I will often feel myself become enamored with aspects of different figures. Usually these people for me are like songwriters or different kinds of performers. So I become enamored with what I perceive as an aesthetic aspect of a person. And that, whatever I get enamored with usually then is resonating with whatever identity I find myself interested in projecting or inhabiting at any given time. I don't think my range is super wide. I don't think anyone who knows me personally and has known me for a long time would say like Teddy transforms every 6 months. He's a different person. But definitely within me, I feel, different seasons, different outfits, yada yada. You may notice that I'm being elusive about naming, names of these aspiring people, songwriters, performers, and I'm noticing that I'm being elusive about it too. I think it's just because I'm bashful, because it can feel silly, the idea, the guy or whatever, that you have a poster on your wall or whatever. But the objective with Talksheets is to be honest. So I'm working from a script. I don't have to think on my feet here. One example is I think Jeff Buckley, dying young aside, whether he did that on purpose or not. this is a good guy to model, yourself off of. He's intelligent. He seems gentle, sensual, sexy, and funny, but also, vigorous in a craft. If not also, unfortunately, mentally ill. But as far as like the Jeff Buckley product, of how I perceive him, where it's like, okay, here's a guy who's really good at something. That's cool. And yeah, he seems to have a sense of humor about himself and, yeah, a certain vigorousness. Um, I like, the principles of like Haruki Murakami. Both, I like reading and hearing about his process, and his discipline, the aspects of discipline. And I do generally fall into phases where I become very preoccupied with figures who represent some kind of like extreme discipline, like my guy James Schultz, who does the 8-hour Pomodoros. I'd say probably about every 6 months I go back to him, where I start like putting Pomodoros on my computer while I do anything, as if I'm doing a Pomodoro, just because I like the idea of the the lone wolf, off the living off the land, just yourself and the Pomodoro. And one also gets inspired when hearing or reading the words of Fred Hampton or Desmond Tutu. But it does feel ridiculous for me to sit here and say these men are my role models. Because I can't really say I've modeled my behaviors of mine after them. I don't think anyone, maybe in thinking, but I don't think anyone would say that the way I've led my life draws a comparison to either of them. They're inspirational rather than somewhat people who I could think of as concretely aspirational, but they're also both very cool. And here's a hard truth, and I'm not exempt from this. It pertains to everyone, not just young men even. Sometimes we like to model ourselves after people who are not morally upright because it's fun. Brat Summer. Charlie XCX herself is a really cool artist that I have a lot of respect for. But the aesthetic of Brat was to destroy your body and friendships, and destroy them with alcohol, cigarettes, and sleeplessness. Me, myself, when I had my state-mandated Bob Dylan phase, yeah, I liked that phase of him that everyone likes in the 60s, when he was, sunglass wearing inside, gone electric, mouthy, shithead, skinny guy from the 60s. We like transgression. We like a little attitude. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I think that's fine to, carry that within your personality or identity, whenever you want. It's not wrong to sample a little bit. But the problem, obviously, is when you are inspired to be cruel and abrasively antisocial, when it starts to really actually maybe like affect yourself and the people around you. And as this is one of those things, when you see it. There isn't really a gray area here. There might be, but when the case is not good. And you can be kind even and still be cool, Kindness doesn't require you to like walk around like Barney's goofy ass. And I'll leave it at that. Okay. I've talked now about young men having friends with young men and their role models. And now I'm going to move on to young men's masculinity as it pertains to the ladies. And just a reminder, we're working on a binary just for the sake of this conversation. Men have always been pigs, right? But if you believe in online discourse, there are no desirable men anymore. They're either unproblematic but like sickly nice and dweeby, or they're kind of like sexy and alluring, but they have serious mental derangements. Or they are seriously mentally deranged and there's nothing good about them. Or, these are the spectrums, these are the ends of the spectrums of the different kinds of problems you can have. I remember a conversation I had once with my friend Peter. This was when we were in college together. And we were talking, and we both admitted that there was a point when we were in middle school and high school where we very feasibly could have both become incels. We kind of compared notes here. Both of us at that age, between like 12 and 16, we were interested in getting the attention of girls, and we also both felt like we were not able to do it, and that there was some kind of problem with us that was preventing us from getting the attention that we wanted from girls. And well, I think probably most young men feel what we felt then at one time or another. And it can kind of represent a crossroads, right? Not that I think that inceldom is something that always just comes as a point of decision in one's life. But how did Peter and I steer ourselves away from it? Like, what happened? I can only speak for myself at this point. But, it was a combination of things, obviously. And let it be said, I also had my own young man growing pains. And to make that point, I'm going to tell you a story of shame, starring me. And, this is on the Talksheet, so I'm sharing this with you all. At the beginning of my sophomore year of college, there was a girl in one of my classes that I had a big crush on. One day I worked up the courage to ask her if she wanted to hang out with me sometime. She kindly said yes, but clarified it would have to be as friends. And I was disappointed, of course, but I kept a brave face and said, sure, no problem. Disappointed, but genuinely feeling like, something's better than nothing. And so there was like a little message back and forth. It was like, we'll hang out on the weekend. Whatever hang out means, I guess unstructured free time. So the weekend arrived. I'd messaged her about finalizing, a day and a time, and I didn't hear anything. The days came and went. Saturday came and ended, and it was like the afternoon on Sunday, and I hadn't heard anything. And I was 19, and I was upset. And I'm I'm repeating something I said earlier. I'm a very non-confrontational person to a fault sometimes. A lot of times, confrontation is healthy for communication. Confrontation isn't necessarily a violent thing. All it really means is, face to face, right? But I had two voices in my head that afternoon, as my stomach roiled with, just feeling bummed. I had two voices. One said, leave it be. You'll see her in class. There will be some excuse. Take the high road, just do nothing. Do nothing. But there was another voice in my head that said, you always get walked over. I don't know if this is true. Maybe, whatever. You always get walked over. And you're just going to let it lie again. You're just going to sit there. It's finally time to stand up for yourself. Which is laughable, of course. But I was disappointed. And something like this had also, sorry, I was referring to my notes or remembering this. Something like this had also happened to me in high school once. It was very sad. A very short version. A girl that I'd had a crush on, even throughout middle school, I asked her to go to homecoming with me. And she accepted and she said, sure, as a friend. And then the night before, she told me she changed her mind and wouldn't go to homecoming with me because it would hurt her chances with the boy she did have a crush on. So she wouldn't even go to homecoming with me as a friend. Whatever. So I decided to finally stand up for myself. Good God. Since that day, I've actually never went back to find those messages. But for you I did, viewer. This is how much I care about you and delivering a scintillating product. So it was physically painful. Let me just say that. I mean, I'm okay. I'm a grown adult now, but it was painful to read. And reading it, this is important because I'm about to speak some of it verbatim. I guess this was an element. I guess I'd been taking notes for her, clearly just trying to curry favor somehow. But anyway, again, point of these talk sheets is to be honest. So this is what I sent that Sunday afternoon when I saw she hadn't messaged me back. Quote, "Hey, honestly and truly, no hard feelings. But if I'm going to retain my dignity from this, I can't keep taking your notes after you fed me a bold-faced lie. Parentheses, aggressive description, I know, but true." Her response, "Excuse me," 2 question marks. So I'm not going to read verbatim anymore. You might be disappointed, but I'm not going to do that. Essentially what had happened, first of all, I'll say the quote, the parentheses, aggressive description, I know, but true, that the fact that I said that is so disappointing. Anyway, it's so lame. But no more verbatim. What had happened is she had broken her arm and was in the hospital, which was why she hadn't messaged me. And she was under a few more quotes for you here. And she was understandably, quote, put off by my behavior and, quote, concerned by what my expectations might have been. Yikes. Now, to my credit, I immediately, upon seeing this, it was like a glass shattered in my mind. I immediately regretted fully my freakish response, and I profusely apologized. I apologized so profusely. It was honestly pretty pathetic to look back on. It ends with me saying, you don't have to look or talk to me ever again. I say that. It's like, if that's what it takes to make this right, you don't have to look or talk to me ever again. Which I see now, it's like, that's not really like, fellas, don't say that. Because that's not really what the other person wants. They just want you to kind of apologize, take ownership, act different. So that's for you fellas. But I felt really bad. But now listen, what happened next is the most important part of this story. I'm gonna take a sip here. And she was right to be, looking back at the messages, it's like, yeah, clearly I expected something. I don't know how I was fooling myself. I'm taking notes for her. I'm getting this upset when we won't hang out. Da-da! I was hoping to get more. Like, I didn't think I was going to convert her. I remember that much. But clearly I was expecting some emotional catharsis that I don't think was on the docket. Anyway, this is the important part. So if you take anything away, listen to this next part. So the next time we had that class together, I felt physically ill leading up to it. I couldn't bear to like be in the same room with her. Such was the shame I felt. I remember just full body sweating, showing up early so I could sit like to the furthest wall from the entrance. And I wouldn't like, I did everything I could not to like, to turn my head not to the side, like, so that I wouldn't even see her. I just didn't even want to, make eye contact. Which it was just, that's how like, and I'll psychoanalyze myself. Probably less what I was feeling was contrition over how I had made her feel. That would have been more ideal. I think I was just mostly like ashamed by, well, it was some of that, but I was just like embarrassed that I had done that and did feel bad about being creepy. And so I just wouldn't look. But then, so I did this for the next couple classes, darted to the wall, sweat, shame. And then eventually I just started, going in normal. Time moves on. You gotta pick up your things and keep going. And what happened next, though, there were a few times where this girl was friendly to me in class. Like, would comment and build off things that I had said, or just other regular classroom things like this. And she spoke to me, made eye contact in a at a very friendly way. And I was blown away. Actually, I could not believe that I had been forgiven. And, looking back, I was probably pretty easy to forgive. I reeked of shame, for sure. There's no way she didn't notice me walking into classroom looking like I was on death row. But truly, I was washed clean by her kindness and that kind of, that symbolic forgiveness. And I know she's not watching this because we never really became friends, which is fine. But thank you. You are awesome. I think about this often and how it changed me. And that's all it took. Simple kindness and forgiveness, and I was changed. And I came out with an actionable lesson even, which I will impart to you. When it comes to texting, do not jump to conclusions ever. Do not jump to a conclusion and then act on the conclusion that you jumped to that might not even be real. Just wait. Do nothing. I kept that in mind. Ever since then, I've stuck to that like it's the holy word, and it has served me greatly. Patience. But it also just taught me a little bit about the indomitable human spirit and the power of kindness. But I was of a temperament to receive that lesson, right? I hate when people are upset with me, for better or for worse, and so I adapted to move forward. I'll be like, I can't find myself in this situation again. Not everyone is of that temperament, and so might have learned a different lesson from that. But here we go. Point blank. If you're a young fella and you want to impress women, you want to be the kind of guy that women want to be with, mostly just comes down to giving a shit. It's just this simple. How would you treat someone you want to impress? You'd make eye contact. You'd ask them questions about themselves. You'd listen to the answer. And then you would be interested in the answer. Now, being interested in things is actually a skill. This is something you can teach yourself, is to be interested in new information, wherever it comes from. And being interested in the information is what's important, because then that's what creates, you can ask a question about the information because you're thinking about it genuinely. You're focused on it. And then that's how a conversation starts. And then that's how you learn more about someone, and you start to build a feeling, and they start to build a feeling around you. You learn about each other, and sometimes the lesson might be, okay, well, I don't have sparkling chemistry with this person, or maybe it is that you do have sparkling chemistry with this person, but you have to be interested in them. That's a non-negotiable. And this next one is difficult. Not have to. Try being confident in the product of yourself. I guess that's a dumber way of saying, just be confident with yourself, what you provide as a person. Present yourself. It's like we're calling back to the lesson with making friends. Present yourself honestly and exuberantly and with a sense of humor. Put yourself out there because you want someone who is going to accept you, right? And so just, be comfortable with yourself if you can. I know I'm sympathetic to those for whom that is a tall order. But confidence is attractive. And that's just a fact. And you can, I hear about the schema with the numbers. The numbers, the fives try to go to the sixes, and this is the attractiveness scale, and the sevens are trying to go down to the fives, and not everyone is as attractive as everyone else, but everyone has different preferences than everyone else, and confidence can transform how you are perceived. But that's what I'll say, because, I don't want to be sitting here giving dating advice, or maybe I do. I don't know. Comment down below if you liked all that. But fellas, just teach yourself to be interested in women. Because they have funny ways, and, they have funny POVs. And, if it is that you just are telling yourself, I could see a criticism. It's like, okay, so now we've got young guys who they have to teach themselves to be interested in what women think, and that does sound kind of bleak, but you got to start somewhere. And so that's what I say to young men. I know none of you are watching this, but just be interested in what a woman has to say, or find something interesting about it. And I know there's, again, probably a million cynical counter arguments to things that I'm saying that, that alphas could present, but I don't care. I said my piece. I'm going to wrap it up now. This has been scattered and inconclusive, but that's how we roll here. And hopefully there were some worthwhile morsels of thought amongst that. I don't have a diagnosis or a cure for the masculinity crisis. And neither does anyone else. And anyone who tells you they do is lying. But I'll leave you with this. And this is good advice. Are you ready? Fellas, listen up. There is something inside you called love. It lives in your chest. No matter who you are, you have it. It might be harder to access for you than other people, but no one walks around with no love, except you know who. And love can act as sort of like a compass or like a radar. It can steer you. In your dealings with yourself and other people, love, there's this, when you make yourself feel, love is like a radar that goes off. It beeps more when you move closer to it. There's a feeling inside you called, that's love, and you know it. And when you start acting and doing things and composing yourself, that love feeling kind of fills you even more and it feels really good. But similarly, if you are kind of doing things that are kind of destructive to you and to other people, that love feeling, you'll feel the inverse. You'll feel something probably that feels shitty. So something to practice, and it's not easy. This is kind of maybe even the point of life, is to try and figure this out, is that you take actions that bring you closer to where love is guiding you. And if you follow all that, you might just like the way you look. Or not. But I thank you for your time, and bye.